Worst Things First podcast is where ordinary people have the type of conversations that reveal the extraordinary in all of us. Every walk of life has a downside. Now let's start at the bottom. Now, if you hear this rhyme, then you already know the time. You are back with WTFP, Worst Things First podcast, with your host here, PHATEROC, and today's very special guest, an undecided high school senior.
That's me.
Briyahn, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, kid. Not too bad at all. What's your impression of this whole podcasting thing?
I appreciate it. I think I'm beginning to be also just a little bit more interested in podcasts myself, because as I was trying to find an occupation and trying to figure out what I wanted to do in my life, podcasts and lifestyle type podcasts were the kinds that helped me. So I was a lot more open to the podcast route that you chose to take.
So give me an idea of some of those lifestyle joints. Give me some examples of those.
So I watched some on occupational therapy. For a while, I was interested in doing occupational therapy as a career, and that actually turned me off of it almost completely.
How so? Can you give us an idea of what occupational therapy entails? Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people don't even know what occupational therapists are. They often confuse them with physical therapists. The way I like to describe an occupational therapist is by comparing it to a physical therapist, though. So let me give you an example. Let's say someone gets in a car accident and they tear a muscle in their leg, or they break a bone. A physical therapist is going to help them do strengthening exercises to help them be able to eventually get up or walk upstairs again.
Okay.
And an occupational therapist is going to provide the person with what they need while they are in the situation that they are in. So they're going to be the person that's like, all right, do you need a wheelchair? Do you need this wheelchair ramp? How can I help you get that?
Oh, okay.
But at the same time, doing a little bit of psychological analyzing. And so you do meet with the parents and the children and just have conversations. So it's a nice little medium between like psychology and then just like an insight into the medical route without having to quite go all the way to medical school.
You interested in the mind and stuff like that, how the mind works?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I've always been super heavy into it. Super heavy into it. So you got turned on at one point. I'm not sure, perhaps that was part of what turned you onto it, the potential for some degree of psychology involved and the study of minds. But you tell me, what was it that necessarily really got you interested about it? And then what was it that turned you off of it?
Well, I'd actually done a summer program at Drake, or it was like a little 2-day camp type thing. And there we were learning about different healthcare occupations. We talked about the pharmaceutical route, being an athletic trainer, being just a nurse, nursing assistant, pediatrician, all those more what we think about as doctors on a regular day basis. And then occupational therapy. And I had never heard of occupational therapy. And at this time, my path was set to be going to Iowa State on a science-bound scholarship. But the only way I was able to receive that scholarship is if I majored in a STEM career. And at the time, What are STEM careers for the listeners that don't know? Oh, right. So STEM is any major that has to do with science, technology, engineering, and math.
Okay.
Agriculture is now included there. Iowa State, I don't know if that's like a whole round thing.
So in order for you to reap the full benefits of this full scholarship, you would have just had to have pursued something in a STEM field, potentially at particular schools or a particular school. But okay.
Correct.
Okay. And so your line of thinking at that time was, okay, my thing in that line of work would be occupational therapy.
Yeah.
All right. So what turned the corner?
Well, I think what my mistake was is prior to that, I had never been interested in any sort of science, pursuing science, because at this time I was still, again, interested in the mind. I also like to, get creative. So just like creating art, even more like off the wall thing, not off the wall necessarily, but
So when you say you were interested in the mind, there are forms of science which focus on that, neuroscience and things like that. But you're saying not that.
Not the scientific, like the more aspect of it, more so the research, the how we can use our mind to create more power over ourselves, not necessarily over other people.
Okay.
But dang, where was it going with occupational therapy?
So you were starting to talk about.
Oh, I know.
What turned the corner?
Yeah. And so when I heard of that, I think the biggest thing for me was like, this is something that sounds decent and I could get my college paid for it to do it.
Gotcha.
But then I started doing a lot more research. You got to go to grad school for that. And I have a passion for learning, but I really, really dislike going to school and receiving like a government-based education. That just always turned me off. So
what would you have instead? Like, you mean like a private education?
If I could choose how I grew up on education? Yeah.
Probably. Word. What might you? What of the private education do you think would benefit you that maybe you didn't get exposed to?
Honestly, I think not only was it not being a private education, it was also our location, living in Iowa.
Yeah.
I was actually just talking to my aunt recently, and she was asking me what we do in our urban leadership class at Central Campus.
Yeah.
So that is an activist-based class. Everyone in there hosts more liberal views on things such as politics, and our economy, socioeconomic status, all those things.
Yeah.
But they and I was explaining this to my aunt, and she looked at me and she was like, "They don't just teach that in schools there?" And I was like, "No." And then I went in and I talked about Black rights, and she was like, "They don't teach that there?" And I was like, "No." And then we started talking about LGBTQ plus rights. She was like, "They don't teach that there?" And she was really appalled by that. And that's when I realized, oh, so I know the education system lacks in it, sugarcoats a lot of things everywhere, clearly, but it's even worse where we are.
Yeah, it's that's always so tough to say. I feel like having lived in Indiana, Iowa, Alabama, I remember at multiple points in time being somewhere and you could swear up and down that our test scores are the best, our high school scores, yada yada yada. The education is the best, and then you end up hearing things from the opposite end of the spectrum. So for me, it's tough to know what to buy into.
Yeah.
But I hear you. I hear where you're coming from, and you're a 16-year-old senior.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did that come about?
I skipped first grade.
Okay.
And
hey, what was that? What was that like? Did you even notice it? Do you even remember the?
Yeah, I was bragging about it to everyone,
Were
and
you?
No one believed me either. Like I used to ride the bus, the school bus in kindergarten.
You're lucky you didn't have to fight.
Right.
Get your little ass whooped over trying to be.
But I was telling everyone in my class I wasn't seeing them next year.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I definitely, that was very vivid.
You remember it's like that.
I remember going to that meeting.
So when would you say that you kind of like lost sight of that and it phased out for you? And I'm asking this because there are there are parents that may be listening. There may even be teens like yourself listening, but people who can get an idea of what it's like for the social adjustment for someone when they're faced with such a thing, particularly when it's that early on. I would imagine you have time to adjust, but please tell me when would you say that kind of phased out for you and it was no longer a conscious thing that, oh shit, I'm a grade ahead right now? These people are older. They're on this tip. I'm not on that.
Oh, that fluctuates.
Okay.
So when it first started, it actually wasn't an issue for me because when I was in kindergarten, I was taking first grade classes. I was going in there when they were doing their reading and their math.
Yeah.
So I was comfortable with a lot of the first graders anyway. Yeah. So once I'd moved to second grade, I was straight with them. And then throughout elementary school, I couldn't tell you much. I don't quite remember exactly how that manifested itself, but it's once things come up where age actually becomes a factor of your life in the sense of all of these people getting their permits at 14 and I just turned 13. Or all these people, which obviously I think about it now, it's not a big deal. I still got my license on time, but at that time it's not. Now everyone getting tattoos.
What?
Everyone turning 18.
What's the 18 thing do for them? What is this? What's that do?
Now it doesn't do much more, especially since the whole tobacco thing got moved up, so they're not really. Wow, it's more just tattoos.
You just trying to smoke squares and shit?
No. But it was just more the tattoos, being an adult, being to do things on your own. Yeah. Say you're 18. And
for you, are you into tattoos?
Yeah.
Oh, so for you, would you rock one because you're into the artistry of it, or more so like what you were just saying, like an expression of being able to do something on your own? Or shit, I guess it could be both.
Yeah, I think me getting one would more so have to do with the fact that it's because, yes, I want a tattoo, but also just something that I'm passionate about. Mm-hmm. Like it wouldn't be just because I know I can do it. I don't know. I don't feel rebellious in that sense.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Like even if I could get it now at 17, I don't know. Yeah. Mom told me about her issue. She regrets her tattoo.
What was the issue that she regrets?
Well, just she did it as soon as she turned 18, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She was like, I just picked the design out the book.
Especially because, hey, right now, like, kids' parents are like, they're from a different era, 90s to 80s to modern day tattoos are way different. Tribal shit went in and out, all types of shit to where, like, you could start peeping somebody's shit and being like, dude, what the fuck were you thinking? Mm-hmm. Seriously. So now at this point, you're still headed out in terms of going to be done with school this year, done with high school this year. Have some thoughts about where you're headed for college. And I know that you're now veering away from the occupational therapy thing. So do you have thoughts on what you're pursuing now? Do you feel pressured to know what you're pursuing now? This is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while.
Not 100% sure on what I want to do. But honestly, I've been very content not knowing, which is wild because I grew up not exactly knowing what I wanted to do, but honestly believing that I could do or go wherever I wanted to so that would naturally come. And so I never understood when I was like in 8th grade or 9th grade, and even my sophomore year of high school when people were in their senior year and it was like February and they didn't know what they were doing. And I was like, you don't want to figure that out. And that was such a big, like a huge thing in my mindset at that time that it's crazy how content I am, like not knowing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know if it's me being content or just kind of trying to like dissociate from it because I also don't talk about it to people. Like anytime someone brings it up, I'm like, I'm not talking about this. I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to flesh that out.
Okay.
Because every time I talk about it, I'm fleshing it out more and more, you know?
I was gonna say,
and so
and
there are times I don't want to do that at school right before I'm going to class.
Yeah, no doubt. I understand that. That's interesting that it causes that automatic flesh out. Because I would say, the suggestion would be, hey, well, just fucking keep the convo short. Just be like, hey, I don't know. Boom, on the way to class. But I understand if it triggers like the mind to go ahead, well, my gears are working on this subject. Let me go ahead and try to solve the puzzle.
No, I'm not saying them bringing it up will make me do that, but I'm saying me talking about it will make me doing that. Because because I can be like, I don't want to talk about it, and I'm blocking that out in my head because I'm like, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to go into that state where I'm fleshing that out. But if I begin talking about it, you kind of automatically have to let that part of you open up, I feel like, because it's like, my options are here, 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 here. And as you're listing those options, you're like, oh, those are options.
That's interesting. I heard you out on that because that's where you and I differ, you know, because I would just kept it mega short and been like, oh man, I wasn't trying to have that convo with you.
Well, I do though. That's what I'm saying.
And you know what I'm saying? Or I'll just hit them with the boom. Yeah, you're right. I guess
I'm just saying when I talk about it, I flesh it out. I'm not saying me fleshing it out is a bad thing.
All right, well, you win this time.
Thank you.
Hey, so when you talk about knowing and not knowing what you wanted to be when you were growing up, kid, I remember. I remember I wanted to be. First thing I wanted to be was a paleontologist, you know. And I remember I had my mom's bought me this fossil collection. I started really being into fossils and even into a little bit of geology and shit like that. You know, I was into like the various types of rock, igneous rock and sedimentary and all those sorts of things. And I loved being able to tell you about pyrite, you know, fool's gold and all this other sort of shit. And, but I remember this, I had this little paleontology kit and I wanted to be a paleontologist for the longest. I was dead set. I knew what I wanted to do. And I felt like, as you were saying, young as hell, like, bitch, I already know exactly what I'm about to be doing. You know what I'm saying? Finding all types of dinosaur bones and shit. And I'll never forget my mom one time when she finally found out that's what I wanted to be. She said, boy, you ain't gonna make no money. She said, boy, you ain't about to make no money trying to look for dinosaur bones. And then she just broke it down to me like, you'd have to have like this monumental find and somebody would have to give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? You know, yeah, kid. And so I stopped wanting to be a paleontologist. But one thing I do remember and I can identify with is when we started getting around that senior year period, like it really did straight up feel like you were supposed to know what you had going down. You know what I'm saying? And when someone asks you, oh, what are you doing next year? That you were supposed to be able to rattle off the school, you know, what are you studying? What's your major? That you're supposed to be able to rattle that off as well. And I remember that sort of that weird sort of invisible pressure, but I think that's mega heavy because to be honest with you, myself included, well, to some extent, I don't know if I can say a majority, but certainly a good percentage of people that I'm familiar with and work with and just hang around with in general who went to college are now involved in something that is different from that major they pursued. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's a very, very, very common thing. And I find the people that I notice being super effective with their decisions in terms of knowing exactly where they want to go, going and pursuing a certain thing and putting that to use are people like closer to like the middle age and like 30s and stuff who are deciding to go to college. And this isn't necessarily saying anybody that you should wait if that's not perfect for you. But I think people who have lived longer tend to know what they do like, what they don't like, what they will put up with, what they won't put up with, what they will strive for and sacrifice for and get up early day after day for, and what they're going to be okay doing thereafter and dealing with the boss and a certain quality of life. I think they have a better assessment of that. So it's actually crazy when you think about it. I've always felt that in at least American society, we have an expectation that 8 years after you turn 10, or in your case, 6 years after you turn 10, you're supposed to make the right decision on what to study to pursue a certain line of career that should be your thing for life. Yeah. That's a hell of a decision to make. If everyone made their first decisions that well, everyone would just have had one job in their history. Shit grows and progresses over time. What do you want to say?
I think it's crazy, but it also makes sense to be able to. I feel like whether it should be enforced or whether pressure should be pursued upon it is a little different. But I don't think it's wrong for like a 16 or an 18-year-old to actually genuinely know what they're passionate about and what they want to do for the rest of their life,
doubt.
even if it's not specific necessarily like what tasks they want to do, but at least whether if they're passionate about the environment, if they're passionate about activism, marketing, anything like that, at least knowing what it is that they want to study. I feel like it makes sense. I feel like the age seems right to start that, but not to be placing pressure on it.
Got you. No, I don't disagree. I think at any age that someone starts to really be able to put on their finger on what makes them happy and what they can see themselves doing every day for the rest of their lives, the closer they can get to achieving some sort of path that involves that thing, the better. And so I don't think you could really put an age on when that occurs, especially not across the board.
But
go ahead.
Okay, so, but if you also think about it, 4 years of your life getting a bachelor's degree, but 4 years of your life is it's a decent amount, but at the same time, if college weren't a money-making industry, if that's not what was the issue at hand and them, wanting money out of us as opposed to actually wanting to provide an education, to help people out, it wouldn't be as crazy to not know what you want to do, to have to go back and maybe now you have to do this 4 years over again, or you're gonna have to do this 4 years again because if you're not paying for it, or if it's not as much as it is now, think about how simple that might actually be.
You think healthcare should be an entitlement? Or let me phrase it differently and say, do you think that everyone growing up in this country, let's just start with this country, not to say others outside of us aren't important, but this is where you're at. Is it your belief that if the system can provide a way for it, that everyone growing up in this country should have the privilege of free healthcare? Not healthcare, but education.
Oh.
Post-secondary,
okay.
College type education.
I think so, but it's also really hard for me to decide on certain policies or ideas like that without being able to flesh out what is actually going on. Because I remember me and you had actually gotten into a politics conversation one time, and what was it that you said?
You sure this was on politics?
It definitely was. It was definitely on politics. You were like, it doesn't make sense to have liberals and conservatives because wouldn't you want the best of both worlds? It doesn't make sense to align to this side of thinking that thinks strongly this, and this, and won't budge on it no matter what's going on over here.
Yeah, to clarify my stance on that generally is anyone who terms themselves as a conservative and then uses that title in that sense of liberals this, liberals that, and vice versa. Most of the people I know, if not all of them, that readily identify I'm a liberal and make sure to state it that way and to give it that title. And they also refer to an opposite side, an opposition as conservative. Those who not only behave that way, but then also tend to not budge along those lines. What is the conservative stance or the liberal stance on this issue, and that issue? Those who tend to do that, to me, some of the behavior seems to be nonsensical because you most likely with anything in this universe are going to need to seek balance.
Yeah.
So yes, you may care about human life, but you, in this particular instance, you also want to make these additional considerations, and that would be an exception to this rule. You know what I'm saying? Yes, you want to allow for the safe entry of people seeking refuge here in this country, and the things that we can do to provide for them. But at the same time, you want to provide safety, so there are certain measures that have to be taken to counterbalance this and that. My main point would probably just have been, it's an alarm to me the moment I hear someone say, these damn conservatives blank or these damn liberals blank. Once they toss themselves into one of those boxes as if they have to exist there and they must wear that apron, then to me, how can I see you serving in another restaurant? And sometimes that other restaurant is one of reason.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Hey, so what's up? How come y'all don't have no fucking homework these days?
We have homework. It's just not.
I'm talking to all kinds of parents. I'm talking to all kinds of parents that are like, my kids don't have any homework. And look, I'm not particularly pissed off about it, especially if there's not any sense in it, if it's not developing the right, behavioral patterns or however you want to look at it. You know what I'm saying? The output that you need from someone to end up being successful.
I can't fully speak on elementary and middle school students on what they get for homework, but as a high school student, we get homework. Teachers just can't grade it technically, so you cannot turn in any homework and you can still get an A in that class. But the issue is if you're not doing the homework, you're probably not doing well in that class.
Okay.
So you're in a sense, especially if it's in advanced class, you're forced to do the homework at some point anyway. We have these things called bodies of evidence. There has to be a certain amount of body or a certain. It's basically 2 pieces of work that convey that you're understanding the knowledge of that topic.
Oh. Okay.
Usually one BOE is that unit test, and then another BOE is. It might be a project that we do in that class. It might be an essay we had to write. And those things are often done in class, but there are some times where we'll take like labs from science home or have to do essays or do work at home. Like, you're not going to finish it in class, so you're going to have to do it at home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, we get homework. It's just not enforced. Okay.
Was that some top secret shit you just shared with us? Like, are you going to get in trouble when you go back to school?
No.
Okay. So, here's the thing that made me open my mind up to this whole no homework thing. This was several years back, and someone I work with took me to what amounted to be a seminar on data and that sort of thing, right? And, being an artist and stuff, I always had this mindset of, especially as a music artist, when they first rolled out the importance of views, influence, the number of likes you can get and all that sort of thing. It's off-putting to a true creative, because your thing is all about, but what about the intrinsic value of whatever you create, the skill, you know what I'm saying? Like the ill shit, come with the ill shit that shows that you have mastered your craft. That is what is worth the fanfare. Now, so I remember a point in time where like, I just, I didn't care about it. And honestly, to this day, there's things that I don't do enough of because I just don't care enough about, you don't share this link enough. You don't send enough GoFund. You don't set up enough GoFundMe things or say, hey, do this for me or do that for me. Because, man, I'm moving on to do the next thing. I can only talk about a thing for so long, right? But so I had this whole mindset against like, not really against paying attention to data. I just had an apathy towards it myself. But I understood it for the corporate world. I understood how if you're improving efficiency and you start paying attention to the rate at which things are happening, it can make a lot more sense. Like, for instance, there was a situation the dude brought up how I think it was Supercuts at the time, was more successful than Great Clips. And the long and short of it is the dude with the data went in and started asking questions, and he was asking questions along the lines of, what kind of specials or sales do you offer? And they may say something like, we would sometimes offer a 2-for-1. And then his next question might be like, okay, so how much of an increase in sales do you have from that 2-to-1 special when you do it on days when it rains outside? Mm-hmm. And they were like, we don't know. He said, well, why don't you know? It's like, what is the rate of drop in business on a day when it rains? They said, we don't know. It's like, well, why don't you know?
Yeah.
Because if you know that on the day it rains, your business drops by 25%, but you know you have an increase in business by 50% whenever you offer the 2-for-1 special, well, now you know what day you may want to decide to offer the 2-for-1 special on, as opposed to just blindly going out and offering that special, right? Mm-hmm. And just getting random results. So he's going over little examples like this in the seminar, and I'm hearing that. And then another topic he turned to was sort of the gamification of the corporate world, and how like people are get used to playing video games, accomplishing a level, beating a boss, having a feeling of achievement, and then there's something new for them to do, another level for them to rock, and how certain employers are moving towards that type of work environment for the person, as opposed to traditional ideas of promotions, and now you're at this level and now you're at that level. But what if we offer you this project, and boom, there's this big climax of you finishing and knocking that shit out. It's just like knocking out a third level right before you get to the warps type shit. Boom. And here's a new project. There's another level. And boom, now you beat the game and we've got you going over here and flying to work on this project type thing. Yeah. But one thing I remember the cat bringing up in that same session was how in certain learning institutions right now, they're already paying attention to the fact of, everyone having access to technology from the standpoint of anywhere from a computer in front of you to your phones to a watch to your glasses. Yeah. And the next thing would be implanted chips, which we already use for a variety of other reasons. And so if we then start to have implanted chips and people can access an encyclopedia or a dictionary or certain equation calculations or formulas and things of that sort, then why would you continue to have testing and exams that were based on people finding a singular answer? Mm-hmm. When if now we're all being the afforded opportunity to look up this information, is the skill that needs to be measured now your ability to locate or your ability to produce that answer, or the skills that are necessary to show that you know how to go about obtaining that information, and the proficiency you show in that is actually the thing of value. Mm-hmm. This was just like conjecture that the cat brought up in this particular thing in the seminar, but it was one of the for all the data experts and heads out there that have been on this for the longest, they're probably, they can listen and be like, dude, this is some basic shit. And it is, and it was, but it's the thing that kind of got me, this is several years ago, but it's the thing that kind of got me into being like, oh, okay. That's what's up with where we are now with information and how it could change the entire scope of things. So in that instance, it was changing tests, exams. We no longer have to test you to see if you can answer these 50 questions, because we know you can look them up on your smart device if you really need to. Yeah. We got to test you differently. And so I guess I can wrap my mind around this whole thing of, well, we're not going to have you do homework just for the sake of checking to make sure that on Tuesday you're providing what you did on Monday, and on Thursday you're providing what you did on Wednesday, if really your understanding and comprehension of it is the more important thing. Yeah. So we want proof of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely how it is, especially in AP classes. I was in AP Calculus this year, and I never turned a single piece of my homework in. She would assign the homework. It wasn't due. That's what I'm saying. The homework was never due in that class. Okay. I had the most homework for that class, but I never turned it in or got a grade.
Weird ass way, but go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm for real, but. She would assign the homework, and it'd be like 50 some problems. And then we would go back, and the next day we would sit there for an hour and a half, and she would just take questions about the homework. Yeah. Because the tests were exactly like the textbook. So if you were understanding what was happening in the textbook, every once in a while she would lecture a little bit. But it was usually us doing group work to like figure out notes
Yeah.
or the answers to homework questions, or her just explaining what the homework was, but we never had to turn it in. So yeah, it's definitely more content based than it is memorization.
What's the worst aspect of school right now for you? Maybe right now for you, and then also these days. I think you know what I mean when I say these days. Like in general for the populace, you know, what would most people say type shit?
Right now, I'm only in 4 classes. Or I guess I should say I only have 4 blocks filled. I'm only in 3 classes, but 2 of them are internships. So I'm really going to 1 core class that's environmental science at Roosevelt. So honestly, my day it goes pretty smooth. It's nice. I just don't like going to environmental science because I'm spending time with either learning about things that I'm passionate about in urban leadership, or I'm mentoring at Hubble Elementary. Mm-hmm. So then I have to come back and then go into the school environment. That's just kind of bleh. But I'm only in there for 45 minutes.
Damn, it's only 45 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Shit, that ain't shit. So environmental science is the worst aspect of school right now for you.
Hey, listen. That's the worst aspect of my school experience. Like when I think about my school day, what I'm most dread about it.
What's your day? Your day. Okay, so then let's expand beyond that. Yeah.
But school.
Go ahead.
I want to start by answering that for the population.
All right.
I think.
Okay.
Because the way SRG is set up and you not having to turn homework in, people.
What is SRG for our listeners?
Standard reference grading.
So this is a certain formula of grading that's done in Iowa. I don't know if it's nationwide or what is it?
I don't know if it's based in Iowa, but it's not a whole lot of schools doing it. Anytime I'm talking to someone else, even people outside of DMPS.
Oh, okay.
This is a DMPS thing.
So this is a Des Moines.
Yeah, so people living in suburbs,
schools
Centennial, Waukee, Johnson, they're all regular 8th grade scale.
Okay. Okay.
The worst thing is with that, you can retake your tests, or you're given multiple opportunities. So if there's a point in which you fail your test, you get a chance, depending on what the teacher decides, you can either retake that test, a different version.
Problem? Are you describing this as a problem?
Yeah, just give me a second.
All right.
This is a different version of the test, but allowing you to retake that test. And then if you fail that, you're probably getting some, you might get to do like some project, end of the unit project. So
as another body of evidence.
Mm-hmm. So basically, unless you're not showing up to class and you're really, really not paying attention, you shouldn't fail the class.
Gotcha.
Whole round. The crazy thing is I start by failing classes because the way I don't be turning stuff in on time. But you can do that with this system. You can wait until the end of the semester to turn in all of your units work, and you will get all of the credit for that.
Yeah.
So if there's a day that I'm up late working on this one thing for urban leadership and this project is due tomorrow, and I know that I can turn it in later, why would I stay up until 4 a.m. doing that anyway? So with that, people who don't understand that you can't do that in college, you can't do that. Even if you really in any career path, you can't, you can, like you always say, you can choose your own reality, mm-hmm. but you also have to work for that in a sense. You can't assume things are going to come to you. You can't start off playing the system when you go in.
Okay.
And so
for you, then this was just like a stage of playing the game this way because you have the potential to play it. Mm-hmm. So play it this way, but you're ready to flip.
Yeah.
All right, then.
Because I understand good note-taking skills. Mm-hmm. You know, I understand how to take notes. I know how to study. But if I know I don't have to do that, then I'm not going to do that. But there are some people that don't understand that there's going to be a point where they're going to have to do that, and they're going to have to know how to do that. And SRG doesn't allow them really
to
learn
experience that. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I see what you're saying. I see what you're
You might, especially if you take an AP class, but the thing is that's going to be your first time understanding that. Because if you start not giving kids homework early on, in kindergarten or elementary school, middle school, when they get to high school and it's, the homework's not required, but you probably should do it because you're probably going to get about 2 grades lower on this test if you don't.
It's going to be likely for them to be like, well,
let me them to not care. They're going to test the waters first because they're not used to doing that anyway. And then you drown and it's a little hard to get up. And
so, do you have an idea of what you're looking at now, or you really are like just truly undecided? I know you say you're content, kind of not knowing, but do you have anything that you're even have a slight interest in that you might feel out these first few years?
Business, entrepreneurship, potentially financing. I want to do a little bit more research in what all that would entail.
Do you like numbers and shit?
Yeah.
I don't know for a fact that you actually get involved with numbers, so don't have no fucking finance people jump on my ass. But
I really, really like math when I understand it. I just struggled in math because there were times that I didn't understand it, but once I could get there, I was straight. I loved it. So yes, but I'm also really interested in budgeting.
Gotcha.
And for our nonprofits that we have to do in urban leadership, where we're creating our own nonprofit organization, it's a simulation. We're getting a budget, and we have to, again, just create our own organization. But in that thing, we're given a budget, $50,000, I believe it is, and that's something I'm super excited for, is going in and be able to break that budget down to the core and be like, all right, this is what we spent here. This is the tax on it. This is going to be the shipping fee here. Oh, we might also have to pay this person. If we order pizza, we're also tipping the driver. Like thinking about all of those intricate details and breaking that down. I love doing that. But I say business and entrepreneurship because what I've noticed about everything that I've said I wanted to do in the past, I've always wanted to be the best that I could be at it, but at the top of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So if at one point I'd wanted to be a lawyer, I wanted to be like the top lawyer. When I wanted to be a doctor, when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be a surgeon. When I wanted to be a teacher, I was talking to you about wanting to open my own school or be a really major part of a school district.
Yeah.
And again, that was actually one of the things that turned me off about occupational therapy is you can open up your own practice, but there just kind of hits a point where it's like I feel like you're still just an occupational therapist. And so I feel like
what is wrong with starting it with any one of those things and at anything you begin at the novice level, and you progress from there.
I would say
and even just being the best at whatever that may be, does the title of being, I don't know, I guess I should let you explain or keep going.
I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah, you do that.
But my interest in entrepreneurship is that I can learn about it while also still trying to figure out what I want to do. Because knowing that I want to be working for myself anyway at some point and doing my own thing. Because if I would have gone the occupational therapy route, I think I would have wanted to open my own practice. That I think this will give me more time to figure out, okay, I know I want to do this and I know I want to be at the top here. Yeah. Also still figuring out strategies to be making money along the way.
Yeah.
But while I'm getting an education for that, I'm still having an opportunity to figure out, all right, what is it that I want to do with that?
I think where my mind was going when I jumped in there a second ago was the angle of dope to if you want to go in the medical field until you decide to be a surgeon. Dope if you decide to go into the legal world, you want to be the top lawyer. And dope if you mention interest in occupational therapy that you want to open your own practice. But I guess my question would be, at any one of those points, did your passion lie in the actual thing that you would be doing, the craft, the art, the science, whatever it is that thing is you would be pursuing? Did it lie in legal work? Did it lie in providing that occupational assistance? Did it lie in that? And then beyond that, you said, so when I do that, I want to be the best version of that? Or would you say your mind simply jumped right to, I want to be whatever is the pinnacle of that profession line?
That was different for each.
Okay.
For each thing. The doctor thing, I don't think I ever really passionate.
It just sounded good.
Yeah.
Everybody everywhere is supposed to at least at one point in time say or think or pretend, doctor's on the list.
Yeah, and then Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
So, yeah. When I was interested in law, I was actually interested in law.
Got you.
My interest in occupational therapy, my excitement came from wanting to open my own practice more than it did the occupational therapy.
It sounds like you want to be in charge of something. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing at all, but I'm saying maybe you are fleshing out, like you say, what it is you want to get into, because it seems like you want to be in charge of something where you are responsible for the rollout. Mm-hmm. This is how this is designed. This is what we're about. This is what our mission. This is what we do. So okay, cool. So that does actually give you a bit of a platform in what to pursue, because you're always going to be passionate about that. Yeah, that's good. You were an athlete.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, because I know you were maybe 8-9 years old, always winning like state track competitions, USATF, AAU, the 100, the 200, the 400. Yep. I know one year you went and I think you medaled at the USATF finals in Kansas, in Wichita, Kansas. And then you drove right from there to New Orleans from Kansas after running your last race. You drove to New Orleans so that you could compete in the AAU Junior Olympics that same year. I think you may have been 8th that year, and came an All-American that year as well. Didn't place nearly as well, but gave a good effort and became an All-American that year. Shortly thereafter, if it wasn't the next year, it was the year after that, you started suffering some knee injuries. Yep. Correct? Yep. I know a thing or two myself about knee injuries. My question to you is, well, let me ask you this. Would you say that you ever really recover fully from that, from a knee standpoint? Do you still have knee problems today? Talk about that.
The knee problems went away for the most part, because my main issue was Osgood-Schlatter's, which is just it's just like a growing disease. Yeah. So my bones are growing faster than my muscles, but I've stopped growing. And on top of that, we used to do a lot of weightlifting for volleyball. Okay. So being able to strengthen my hips and my quadrant area helped me take all the pressure off my knees. And as an athlete, I knew how to move. So even though my body maybe couldn't move like perfectly, or I can't squat this way perfectly, I knew how to do it for my body without getting injured. So I'm sure. So what I think what I'm trying to say is I probably still would have those issues with my knees if I was still moving them the way that I used to move my knees.
I got you. So here's where the line of questioning is going, is because I know that at a real high level you were performing in where track is concerned. As the years went on, as you moved towards your junior year, your senior year now in high school, while you were still participating in sports, it didn't seem that you were necessarily at that same level. And so it would be important for listeners to be able to understand, and young listeners in particular who are dealing with early injuries early into their athletic tenure or their athletic career, to hear out someone who's kind of gone through that thing where you started out with a bang, went and performed at the highest level, did well at the highest level, was anticipated to do a similar thing the next year and started out that way as well until you did run into some other injury issues. And then you got smart enough and changed up the flow of what you were getting into, the sports you were involved in. And that helped because then you're exercising other muscles and stuff and not causing damage to the same areas. But I didn't know if you could speak on that. Like, did that bother you at all? Was it something where you like kind of feel like, because I know what it's like to have the body, feel like the body's letting you down. Mm-hmm. Your mind knows what you want to do. You have the tenacity, but talk to me about that.
The injury made me upset at certain times. Only when it was like, if you're ever listening to like any song and it like if it was a song that you used to listen to before that meet or before a meet, or if it was a song that you used to listen to before practice or during track season in general, then you start to like reminisce, or you start to envision yourself running and you know that you can't do that. You can't physically do that. So having that adrenaline kind of rush up in you and you know that you can't let that out in the same way that you used to. Sometimes that would get me, but track was also so vigorous that you also had to find beauty in the break. Yeah. Which is also, I think, what... I don't know that it kept me away from track because I still did go back. I would say volleyball more so pushed me away from track just because that was a lot more.
Yeah, my fault.
What? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I don't even remember. I really don't.
Are you sure?
I really don't.
Because I'm about to just flip the whole damn thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what's the most popular drug that you would toss out at schools these days? I'm not asking you to toss any particular school under the bus. I'm not asking anything of that sort. But you being someone who is steeped into the culture and the population these days in this day and age of your age group, what would you say? What's rocking right now?
Weed and alcohol. That's just always the thing.
Yeah.
Acid.
Is acid back like that?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Adderall.
Okay.
But that's not as big. Like within schools, like I feel like we don't really go around hearing about it every day. Yeah. But like, there's a lot of people. Yeah. That are on Adderall and like are on TikTok. They be coming out on TikTok. They be coming out on TikTok making jokes and memes.
Super alert and shit.
Yeah, and it'll be like the most normal people. And it's just like it's used as a study enhancer.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
And so and there's also just so many people with ADHD. I personally know someone with ADHD who like doesn't like taking their drugs because it makes them feel bogged down. So obviously that person doesn't sell their drugs, but it's not difficult.
What would you say is the current what is the perception of the opioid crisis right now amongst heads your age and shit? Like, do motherfuckers look at it the way we looked at Ebola? Like, yeah, but...
Not, okay. All right. Not at the way we looked at Ebola, but we've had a lot of people die, just especially from like mixing overdoses, so like Xanax and alcohol. Yeah. Fentanyl. Yeah. Heroin. But the people that are like fentanyl and heroin, those are people those are overdoses that have been graduated. So that would have to be like someone knowing a sibling. So we just kind of know of them, but it's not like people our age right now are dying off of fentanyl and heroin, but Xanax.
Some are, but I hear what you're saying now. I hear what you're saying now.
But like it's not like the Ebola.
Yeah, would you say everybody's coming in at this point like you know, at this point in modern times in America, high school, everybody's coming in like knowing what the science is, knowing what's up, even if they don't partake, knowing what's up with everything.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Like even the squares knowing what's up.
Yeah. I
got you.
Yeah, especially with technology. It has to be that way.
Yeah, you get exposed to, you get to see everything.
Yeah, and like going to elementary internships and like kids there being like, oh, like, can you do this TikTok dance with me? Or can you do this? And I'm just thinking about my For You page and like what pops up on there. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, so like whether they get it now or not, they're going to get it.
Yeah.
Before they're 14.
Would you say then also that there's because kids are getting involved earlier, that there is a quicker maturation in their use of it, their familiarity with it, and all that sort of thing? Or would you say like, no, heads are not getting any better at dealing with it? Nothing's really changed in that regard.
I was gonna say that. Yeah, I was. It's funny because I was almost gonna say it's almost like they're smarter now because they start talking about things, but the thing is it's things that they're passionate about because they're seeing it all over like social media, which is something that kids enjoy. Yeah. And so when they're talking about those things, they talk about them more precisely and more fluently and more maturely than they would if they were just having like a little friend to friend conversation anyway. So them being exposed to those things naturally makes them more inclined to not only discuss those things, but also know how to navigate it.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's a strange balance, ain't it? It's a real strange balance when you think about the dangers of certain things, but the in order for people, in other words, to know and understand the benefits of marijuana and THC and other cannabinoids, there had to be the lifting of prohibition so that it could be studied, so you can know those things. Reminds me of being up in Denver. Shout out to my man Main Rock, Stay Tuned crew out there in Denver. But reminds me, I think this was the night he brought me to Denver, and we actually rocked with Pete Rock, CL Smooth. I can't remember who else was on that particular show, but I was there courtesy of my man Main. So much love to that. But I remember drinking a little bit too quickly that night, and I almost got sick, and I hollered at him later on about it. And he was like, and there were other heads that were like peeling just out, like blah, like everything out on the floor type shit. And I remember talking to him about it later on. He was like, yeah, that's that thing. He's like, that's the thing that happens. Like, he's like, people come up to here from other states and stuff and they forget about the altitude. And so they'll just drink. You know what I mean? He's like, whereas here, because of the altitude and because of us getting used to the fact that the alcohol is going to impact you a certain way, we take we have a glass of water in between beers. So it's a natural thing that they do just because coming up, they're exposed to the need to know how to navigate a little better. It makes me think about people in, Germany and stuff with the lower drinking age. I think it may be 16 over there and maybe a little older for spirits. Could be wrong about that. You biracial, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. So, so my question is, do you, in this day and age, I swear it feels like y'all have a really compassionate era right now. Like there's this whole anti-bullying campaign stuff and all this other sort of thing. You told me before, like there are fights at schools, but it's nothing like what I would describe and remember from back in the day type shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it just seems like generally speaking, like this is a more compassionate era. I don't know if you can attest to that since you've only been here 6 years past 10.
That's because y'all grew up.
Yeah. What do you mean we grew up?
Like, it's those parents that are like the most anti-bullying, overprotective, what we think of like our
Are you saying I caused those parents? I wasn't a bully.
No, I'm not talking
what the fuck? I wasn't a bully.
I'm talking about your generation. Yeah. Maybe a little bit older than your generation, just because I know, like, young parent. But
I'm just saying, when I see people, like, if there's a post or something goes wrong with somebody, I see, like, all types of people being like, hey, pick your face up off the concrete. You'll have the sun's going to come out later. It's going to dry that blood. Like, all this super positive shit, which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I actually would rather my daughter, if I'm raising a daughter in this world, to be in a more compassionate world. But I wonder about that. The reason I asked about you being biracial is because I wonder if there would be anything to say about being in today's climate, societal climate, and what it's like navigating high school that way. Is it any sort of way? Is it not even noticeable, you know?
We have a fairly diverse school. So, being at Roosevelt, I've never really felt any sort of way. I've always identified as Black.
Yeah.
So I've never, I mean, I've had like some thoughts, you know, I've just fleshed things out in your own head every once in a while, but it's not like an issue or an insecurity that I have.
Yeah.
But, I would notice it. You notice it a lot more when you're in your honors and your AP classes, and when you're going to Central Academy for your higher academic classes, when everyone there is white, and you know, it's honestly not because people are treating you a certain way, because it's not that, but it's the feeling that you have to code switch, and that just how much energy that can take sometimes, feeling like you kind of have to do that.
Yeah.
That's just draining.
Well, yeah, I think part of that comes from, I don't know how to term this, but I think in the past I've termed it as collective guilt. I think that people of color, particularly Black Americans, we tend to feel, maybe responsibility is a better word.
Yeah.
I think we tend to feel a collective responsibility for being the representation or the impression of the rest of us. So if there is one of us in a room and we are the only person in that room, we don't want to be, we don't want to seem uncivilized. We don't want to seem, crazy. We don't want to seem stupid. We don't want to seem anything that's going to embarrass the rest of us.
Right.
And you know, I was talking to somebody one day about that and wondering whether or not that stems back to, like, you know, the slave mentality and the how the slave master would pit the yard Negroes and the field niggas against the house niggas. And the way that they would go about doing it is, you know, they get certain perks to one. They would whip one if they tried to run away and if they didn't tell on others. And so it got to a point where some despise the others. You know, to this day, you hear people talking about your field nigga hair and this and that or whatever, you know, and all that sort of thing. But I think in that same sense that that we could sometimes be pitted against one another, there could be a tendency to feel as if it's a representation. So, like, if you misbehave, Master gonna think everybody misbehaving. Don't do that type shit. Yeah. So there's a little bit of that, I think, sometimes from people, but there's also just, I think, like we say, like a tendency to want to put up a good representation. And here's an indicator of that. Everybody that's of color, particularly Black, but honestly, I've noticed this in other cultures as well, especially when there's only so many of that culture in a particular area, where they're a minority in the area. They tend to identify this way, where if they watch the news and they see a crime being committed on the news, and then they see that the person is a Black person or a person that matches their particular ethnicity, if they happen to be a minority in the area, right away, especially if you have old people from that culture in the room, you'll hear them, oh, shit, look what you're doing, you know? And while a piece of that may be, this act is a heinous act, why commit such a crime? Quite often the first thing is, damn, why you have to be Black doing this? Or why'd you have to be Asian doing this, or whatever doing this, you know? And I don't think that a lot of people who are not of color actually understand that phenomena, actually understand that whole thing of, like, when you do something, even though the rest of the community may not even know you or have any attachment to you whatsoever, in that moment of scrutiny, they do feel connected, and they do feel that what you did was a representation of them. And so they have to now counter that representation or accept it or that sort of thing. Yeah. And so for those who aren't aware of what you mean when you say code switching, was there something you wanted to add to that to further define code switching? Because I know that a lot of that stems from us having to represent the us.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what you said. There is this feeling, especially when you get around certain group of people, especially if it has to do with professions or academics. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you're just out in the public, I mean, you could care less. Mm-hmm. But when you're in a situation where your future can be either enhanced or jeopardized, you kind of have to play up to the standard that they would expect to see. Maybe not to the fullest extent. You still, obviously live up to your own morals, and you don't stretch yourself out farther than you need to. You don't go to the extent of not being yourself. Mm-hmm. But there just might be certain traits of yourself that you just kind of chill on. Yeah,
we speak a little bit more properly. Mm-hmm. Like I can speak publicly with the best of them, but at the same time, you know what I'm saying, you put it on a motherfucker, you know what I'm saying, and start cutting off the G's on the ing words and all that sort of thing. But I think it's similar to it's not even necessarily having anything to do with being fake. It's more like if you're Jamaican, when you're in the presence of other islanders, you may speak your heaviest patois, but if you were born here and also your American English has all of the natural tendencies of an American, then when you're speaking with someone who's not of the island, you may speak more along those lines. Mm-hmm. It's not really being fake. It's really like an exercising
it's
of
very
each.
Natural.
Yeah, it's easy sometimes for people to be like, you're doing that, you're using your white voice, or you're doing this or that, and you're using what's necessary at the time to achieve what you need to achieve. Mm-hmm. To your point, as long as you don't let that somehow consume you and change who you are, I think you're on a good path. We had a hell of a conversation here today, young lady.
Are we done?
I believe we should be for the first time out.
Oh.
Before we do that, were there shout outs you had, anything you wanted to put out there, anything to focus on? You don't know what the fuck you're about to do for a career, so you can't throw out no jobs for people to come
I'm
support.
not throwing out nothing.
Okay. Well, that's what's up. We were glad to have you here today. I think it was super insightful. If there's anyone who checks this out, particularly the YouTube version, please feel free to leave comments below. If you have a youngster who is going through the same things, have maybe learned something from this episode, or you have insight to add to us, make sure you like and subscribe, comment as much as you can, and open your ears up and have these sorts of conversations with the youngsters today, because only in having these conversations will your eyes no longer be blinded to what's actually going on. And I think at that point, you maybe have an opportunity to reach middle ground and to solve some issues. And if not solve the issues, understand them at least. And with that, you know what it was and you know what it is. You were back here with WTFP, Worst Things First podcast. We out. Much love for rocking with this episode of WTFP. If you enjoyed what you heard today and want to hear more honest discourse with interesting people from ordinary walks of life, please like and share this clip. Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Every walk of life has a downside, and we begin the conversation there. This is Worst Things First, the podcast.